The battle for Portland wages on. 14 are shot at a funeral in Chicago. The Pelosi virus is spreading. The Missouri Attorney General is going to tell us why all charges should be dropped against the McCloskeys. And Rutgers wants to promote incorrect grammar in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Welcome, everyone, to the Buck Sexton Show. My, oh my, the stuff that is going on in Portland is nuts. Crazy, isn't it? If you haven't seen some of the videos, they're circulating all over the place. They are, of course, trying to tell us that what you're seeing is democracy in action, that these are mostly peaceful protests. They're mostly peaceful. I mean, they have set up in phalanx formation in the videos that you can see, operating with the rehearsed tactics and cohesive maneuver of a domestic terrorist paramilitary group. And they're trying to destroy federal courthouses. And the only thing the media focuses on right now, this is a fascinating example of the propaganda at work here. The only thing the media wants to talk about is the police response. So you have the Democrats undermining our society. These are all Democrats doing this. And I want to be almost too insistent on this point. Yeah, I know. Oh, they're anarchists. Oh, they're... No. First and foremost, these are Democrats. These are the shock troops, the stormtroopers. This is part of the Democrat blitzkrieg of 2020. That's what is happening right now. The mobilization of all these different movements on the street, the rhetoric that has taken hold, not just for community organizers and rabble-rousers of all kinds, but in the corporate boardroom now, the most powerful corporations in the country. This is the organized, institutional, establishment left embracing a radicalism that we've known is there and has been growing for a long time. Now it's running the show. And if you're wondering just to what degree, Joe Biden, who's supposed to be the moderate, long-standing, solid as a rock, the rock of Gibraltar of the Democrat Party. Joe's been in the game for 40 years. He'll bring us back together. Joe worked for Obama as his VP for 8 years. It's all a sham. It's all a facade. It's meant to fool you. Biden is just the puppet. They're putting him forward. He is the empty vessel, empty up top in the brain, empty when it comes to courage and virtue and leadership. He is the empty vessel through which the far left will dictate policy in this country. While we're seeing just stunning stuff. I mean, the most aggressive, violent, Antifa-style protesting since, I can't even think, maybe the WTO mayhem in Seattle, which was almost now, I think, decades ago. We are seeing stuff that we have not had to see for a long time. And you would think that any presidential candidate, I should say, looking at this would understand you can't allow this. You can't allow people for reasons that are really not even disclosed, right? Some of it's Black Lives Matter. Some of it's end the carceral state. All these phrases and slogans that show up at these protests. And if you want to know how stupid and how feckless and reckless is the Democrat left now, they will have not just the people on the streets who want to destroy everything. They'll have some of their favorite members of Congress write stuff like this. This is Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She tweeted out earlier today, cancel rent, cancel mortgage, cancel student debt. And to this, I want to say, cancel credit card debt, right? Cancel all of I don't want to pay anybody anything. I just want more for me. I don't want to have to go through with my obligations. I don't want to have to honor contracts, right? That's the mentality of the left. That's what the Democrats are letting you know. This is childishness. This is the outcry of a mob of mad babies. We want this, or we'll destroy things, and we'll scream, and we'll cry. This isn't using the political system. This is using the threat of force. This is coercion. This is destruction. This is vandalism. This is criminality. And yet, what does Biden? Oh, that's right. He's such a trustworthy, a seasoned elder statesman. He's definitely elder. And look, I know there are 78-year-olds who could kick my butt and run 10 miles tomorrow, before breakfast. I get that. Biden's not one of them. That's the point. Okay, Biden's not there. We've all seen it. We know there's deterioration. Signing up to be president, that they would put somebody forward that it's truly crazy to think that this guy has 8 more, not just decent years of health, 8 more years of a ferocious energy and focus necessary to be president. Say what you will about Obama, and there's a lot that I've said and a lot that I don't like. Obama had the focus. Obama had the health and the energy to drag this country closer to socialism than it's ever been. That was not a concern. With Joe Biden, it's a concern. And more than a concern, it's obvious. But while this is happening, and Portland now has become, this is all about the theater, right? And terrorism, and they're acting like domestic terrorists, less than lethal terrorists. They'll hurt cops. They'll hit them with plywood with nails in it. They'll throw rocks at them. But they know that if they start killing people, it'll cause too much of a backlash. Then finally, the good guys will be willing to use the overwhelming force necessary to defeat the bad guys. We're not there yet. There's no political will in these cities. The people that are calling the shots for law enforcement officers at the local and state level in Oregon, in Washington, are unwilling to give them the leeway necessary to shut this stuff down. But these domestic terrorists are doing this for the theatrics. They do this for the gram, so to speak, the Instagram. They're doing this because they want everyone across the country and around the world to focus on their banners and their movement. And it creates this energy, right? This infectious energy of political stupidity, but it's out there. It's all over the place. People say, yeah, that's right. This is a really a funnel for anti-Trump outrage. This is a funnel of Trump derangement syndrome that they're creating with all of this. And I'm seeing now on social media, people will do things like share a video of really nasty police violence. And this was a blue check. I can't remember who did it, but it was nasty police violence, and it went super viral. And it's, you see what's happening here? Just wait until 6 months passes if Trump has his way. It's like the Stasi all over again. Oh yeah, that's what we're hearing now. And those losers at the Lincoln Project, it really is. It's the loser project. It's just a whole bunch of losers. They're just good at doing one thing: losing and trying to tear down people smarter, better, and more successful than they are. That is the Lincoln Project, which if you don't know what that is, it's this group that's supposedly Republicans that want to help get Biden elected. George Will. I'll never read another George Will column by choice unless I'm going to make fun of it for as long as I've. George Will now says he's going to vote for Biden. Wow. These establishment conservatives, they see what's going on in the country and they're thinking, yeah, I want more of the anarchy and recklessness and destruction of the rule of law and socialism and statism and tyranny because I'm the real conservative. These people are lunatics. George Will. He's always kind of a smarmy little school marm, Really was. Never really liked that guy anyway. So I don't know him. I just don't. I know his persona. I know the way that he presents himself. The hall monitor of the conservative movement. So here we are now. It's so clear that the Democrats are rooting for the violent mob that's trying to tear down our federal courthouses. Remember, we were lectured for the entirety of the Trump presidency about how Trump is undermining our institutions. Trump is destroying our institutions. That was the talking point. That was the line that you heard from so many people across the Democrat Party and the media. And now here we have an instance of mobilized leftist Democrats who are literally trying to destroy an institution of the federal government, a federal courthouse in Portland. And whose side are the Democrats on? The marauding barbarians. I was surprised. My favorite thing I saw from Andy No, who's out there covering all this on the left coast, the West Coast. There's this group that call themselves the Moms, and they're all wearing these yellow T-shirts, and they're making this big deal about how, we're moms, and we're here to protect the protesters. And Andy knows them. He's familiar with them. He says a lot of them he recognizes from other Antifa protests where they were wearing the all black and now they've done this whole, oh no, we're moms. He says that most of them aren't moms, or aren't mothers, and many of them don't even identify as female, seriously, but they're wearing yellow We Are Moms T-shirts. That's how honest this movement is. Oh yeah, they're moms. They're not mothers, and they don't even think they're female, but they're moms all right. That's what Andy's telling us. He's doing great work. He really is. But what does Biden have to say about this? In a normal political environment, the Democrats would put forward some statement like, we do not support this destruction and violence. We call for this to end immediately. This is not who we are. But we also decry the heavy-handed tactics of Trump, blah, 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 blah. Right? That's what, in a normal world where people were still saying that's what would be said. No. Instead, the problem, just as the lib leftists during the war on terror always found any response to Al-Qaeda was the cause of Al-Qaeda. That was their mentality, and that was their primary talking point, right? It's the fighting against terrorism that creates it. You go back, you remember this. That was across the board. The Democrats were, hey, don't be too mean to don't do too much against Al-Qaeda. You're causing more terrorists by killing members of Al-Qaeda. That's what they would say. Well, now here in a domestic political context, enforcing the law is causing lawlessness. That's what they're constantly saying now. They pretend that none of this other stuff is even happening. Here's Biden. We have a president who's determined to sow chaos and division, to make matters worse instead of better. We all remember the appalling scenes in front of the White House when peaceful protesters were gassed to make way for a Trump photo op. Now Homeland Security agents, without a clearly defined mandate or authority, are ranging far from federal property, stripped of badges and insignia and identifying markings to detain people. They are brutally attacking peaceful protesters, including a U.S. Navy veteran. It's just stunning, isn't it? It's stunning. Oh, no, it goes on. Of course, the U.S. government has the right and duty to protect federal property. The Obama-Biden administration protected federal property across the country without resorting to these egregious tactics and without trying to stoke the fires of division in this country. We need a president who brings us together, blah, blah, blah. What a bunch of just malarkey, to borrow a Bidenism. A big pile of malarkey. I like that word. I'm not giving that word to Biden. He's a pile of malarkey. During the Obama administration, whole neighborhoods were burned down. Yeah, they did a great job. The BLM movement started during the Obama administration. So let's not pretend that they had some good handle on things, right? There wasn't some great wave of racial healing that occurred under the 8 years of the Obama administration. In fact, what we saw was a focus from the president and his entire White House on individual cases like the George Zimmerman case, like with Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Ferguson, making things worse by feeding into false narratives that their base wants to hear. Cops are the bad guys. Cops are killing unarmed black men all the time. And this is a systemic issue. Biden is, because he has to be, in order to get his base to turn out for him. The Democrat base is now clearly on the side of the angry, lawless, vicious mob. Not all Democrats are a part of that mob, but they are all rooting for the angry, vicious, attacking mob on the streets of cities across the country. I hope those independents and swing voters that we're now going to start counting this election's distance from today in weeks, not months. I think it's 6 weeks or so before the first votes start being cast. It's not far away. I hope that enough Americans are watching this, seeing the lawlessness, the disorder, the disarray, and the abject cowardice and cynical opportunism of the Democrat Party. That's who they are. That's what they are. They should be held to account because they're a disgrace, folks. They're a disgrace. I can't believe we're being evicted from our home that we didn't sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out she was the victim of home title fraud, which is a crime that can cost you your home. Title fraud is not covered by insurance or identity theft services. The only trusted folks to protect your home are at Home Title Lock. Your home's legal titles online where cyber thieves find it and forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. In Deborah's case, she didn't know she was a victim until the eviction notice arrived. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. If tampering is detected, they instantly mobilize to stop it. So go to HomeTitleLock.com today and register your address to see if you're a victim and don't know it. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. That's code BUCK. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Again, protect your home from home title theft by going to HomeTitleLock.com. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection.
You know, I didn't endorse Donald Trump and, in fact, didn't vote for him for president, as you know. And I was always concerned that but was hopeful that perhaps he could get to the point where he could unite the country. I've now become convinced, absent a Damascus Road experience, I've become convinced that he's not capable of this. He is not capable of being a unifier. In fact, I've become convinced that he doesn't know how to accept personal responsibility and always finds somebody else to blame.
That's Kasich, if you're wondering, who's a loser and is also a surly fellow. I do not like him from the times I have interviewed him. I'm not look, and I usually give people a pretty wide berth of, I know they've had a long day sometimes, whatever. But he's a jerk. And he's bitter because he thinks, I'm just a guy, my dad was a mailman and I'm going to run the country now because, I just sort of do the whole fake folksy thing and I tell the libs what they want to hear so they don't hate me as much as they hate other Republicans. And yeah, that's right. The Trump is not unifying the country. Isn't it fascinating? Democrats are both arsonist and firefighter in their own formulation here. They create all the disunity. Right? They create this, and then they turn around and say, look at all the disunity. Why can't Trump make us more unified? We will do a better job. Liz Cheney, who is getting a lot of heat right now from some of my conservative brothers and sisters because she was spreading around the Taliban bounty story, which was just bull. As I told you, right? Didn't the Buckster tell you this is nonsense? They're killing as many Americans as they can for their own purposes without a bounty. Anyway, Cheney understands at least where Biden is during all this, trying to hide from accountability. Play 19.
We would see efforts, and unfortunately, we would probably see success at defunding the police, the elimination of Second Amendment rights. We'd see our national defense cut. We'd see a situation in which the production of fossil fuels would be significantly curtailed, moving towards a Green New Deal. We'd see probably the end of the filibuster in the Senate. We'd see efforts to make D.C. a state. We'd see efforts to expand the size of the Supreme Court and pack it with liberal justices. There's absolutely no question what's at stake in this election and how much worse off this nation would be under a Biden, Schumer, Pelosi regime. Now, it's also important to remember that Vice President Biden, as we all know, is in his basement. Vice President Biden is in his basement partly because he's concerned about his ability to make it through an interview, but also because he doesn't want to have to talk about his socialist agenda.
They're hiding Biden in the basement, not from the virus so much as they are from the Democrat socialism. It's true. What's it going to take for Democrats to admit that their approach, that their policies aren't working, people are dying from them, and all they have to do is change course? They don't even have to admit they were wrong in some of these cities. They don't have to say, turns out that coddling criminals and downplaying the role of deteriorating families in high crime communities and the lack of emphasis on respect for authority and on education and all. They don't have to talk about all that. They could at least just say, we're going to let police and cops do the jobs they need to do to keep more people safe. And I'm not saying that the cops they're not superheroes. They can't do everything. But they could certainly do more than they are in some of these cities if the political authorities in charge, Democrats, let them. But it is worth asking, what's it going to take for them to finally relent? And in an election year like we're in right now, as you can understand it, the answer is nothing. There's no level of violence, of anarchy, of lawlessness in major U.S. cities that would bring them to make any change from the approved DNC talking points. And that's why I see a story like this, and I mean, it's a gut punch. This is completely insane. You know, I remember I spent years of my life working on a CIA desks in 2 war zones, and going to those war zones and covering, covering, it's not like a journalist, but, you know, dealing with the issues of counterinsurgency and terrorism in those countries. And that's what you think of when you hear, I mean, a country that is in a failed state status is what you think of when you hear about something like this. This is from ABC News, which really is as liberal as CNN now. I've been seeing a lot of ABC's coverage and the way that these big networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, the way that they present information, news, is every bit as Democrat aligned as anything you'd see at CNN and MSNBC. But I digress. Okay, here's what ABC writes. At least 15 people, it was initially they said 14, now it's at least 15 people were shot outside a Chicago funeral home in a drive-by shootout during a ceremony for a man who was killed in an earlier drive-by shooting, according to the Chicago Police Department. The city's mayor and police officials are urging the public to come forward with that information to help end the cycle of violence. An unknown number of people inside a vehicle at a crowd attending a funeral on West 79th Street in Chicago. The individuals on the street exchanged gunfire with the people in the vehicle. As people were coming out of the funeral home, the shots rang out like they were literally raining on them. Police said 15 people, 10 women and 5 men, whose ages range from 21 to 65, were taken to 5 different hospitals with gunshot wounds. 3 women and 3 men were listed in serious condition. There were 60 shell casings found at the scene. This is out of a war zone. 15 people shot in one incident. 15 at a funeral, for heaven's sake. At a funeral. They kill a guy, and then they find out when the funeral's going to happen for that guy, and then they show up to kill all the people going to the funeral. How much more sick and evil can you be? But you know what's going to fix this? You know what's going to fix this? Some protests over the killing of George Floyd. That's going to fix this. The defunding of police. That's going to fix this. The end of the carceral state. That's going to fix this. This is insane. We all know it. Democrats wholesale believe it. They believe it because they desperately need some moral superiority to cling to in the current national political debate. Oh, we care so much. We, the Democrat Party, care so much about oppressed minorities. We care so much about the history, the legacy of slavery and racism in this country. The other side doesn't. That's a lie. The other side, Republicans, conservatives, I'd say people who don't suffer from extreme Trump derangement syndrome, see what's happening in this country and say, if we're really concerned with saving lives, we need to get a handle on what's going on in these cities where the violence keeps occurring. People die. Families are ruined. 15 people shot. That's a lot of people. I mean, a giant gun battle at a funeral? If this was a news story about something that had happened outside of Jalalabad with the Taliban involved, people would say, whoa, it's not going. Our whole pacification of Afghanistan is not going very well. This is in Chicago, the third largest U.S. city. New York has spiking violence right now. Now, look, New York is starting at it was handed over to the moron de Blasio at a very low level. But New York City, which is, the center of now the defund the police movement for many Democrats, shootings are up 253% this year. Now we're on 7 months of this year. So we're past the halfway point. This year to last year, direct comparison. Arrests, meanwhile, are down 62%. Oh, hold on a second. Much more crime, far fewer arrests. Can anyone see a correlation here? Minor crime summonses down 86%. Traffic tickets down 76%. Criminals know they can get away with anything. That's the quote from the New York Daily News. It's just a free-for-all now. You know why? Because if a cop comes up to you and says, hey, well, what are you doing? Stop stealing that pair of sneakers from that store you just ran into. You know what the bad guy has to do now in order to get away? Run. And you know what happens if the cop is able to catch him? Fight. Elbow the cop, kick him. That cop can't pull his weapon. Cop probably can't even pull his less than lethal. Can't pull a taser or a baton. So it's a foot race, and then it's a wrestling match. And if for some reason the cop is able to win the wrestling match, which won't always be able to do, they'll be released because we have no bail anymore in New York. They'll be released, within an hour, back out on the street. Oh, the court's going to put out a summons for them to show up at the courthouse. Oh, I'm sure they're terrified about what's going to happen there. Who's going to go and arrest them for the low-level offense and for not showing up to court? Nobody. Remember that Chesterton quote? A great society like ours, it implodes because it forgets the most obvious, the most important truths, and we're seeing that happen right now. And you understand the motivation for this. The lies that the Democrats have told, the lies they've told because it allows them to have a feeling of moral superiority to the other side, and then beyond that, the incentive that they have in misery. The Democrats are incentivized to create chaos and misery and despair in this country. And as we know, it's all as soon as Joe Biden comes into office, there'll be news stories about, the economic recovery really is underway. Maybe we really need to learn to live with this virus and stop cowering in fear. Maybe we're all going to be okay, actually, after Biden wins. I mean, I could set the clock to it right now. It couldn't be any. Now, I'm not saying Biden's going to win, but that's the point here. That's the purpose. You think that these Democrats care about what they're doing to the country in the interim? About the people who will suffer, the businesses destroyed, the livelihoods ruined, the people who will die? They do not care. They do not care because they also reject any responsibility for it somehow. They reject reason and accountability because that gives them political advantage. They don't have to debate and they don't have to be held responsible for anything. They just get to run around and screaming and saying, it's all Trump's fault. It's all Trump's fault. Or my favorite, say that whatever the problem is the result of the coronavirus, and then the coronavirus is Trump's fault, right? It's the transitive property of coronavirus Trump blaming. Whatever the issue is in your city, oh, no, it's COVID. That's the problem. And Trump is the reason why COVID's so bad. So it's Trump. Oh, isn't that quite a neat trick they've pulled off? Here is de Blasio saying exactly that the problem here is, and this is the mayor of New York, the guy who thought he was going to be the Democrat nominee. He's a total lunatic. And here's what he says about why they're spiking. I told you the numbers. He can't hide from it anymore. New York is in bad shape right now. And here's what he's saying. Play clip 7.
We have to make our streets safe. It's the number one responsibility of anyone in executive office. And you're right, in New York City, we've been the safest big city in America for years. We've had a very tough few months, no doubt, and it is directly related to the coronavirus, the dislocation it's caused in our society, the fact that our court system is not functioning yet. So many factors that have been absolutely aberrant for just the last 4 or 5 months. But we will beat it back because we've done that for a quarter century in this city. And Joe, the key point is, we will do it.
Yeah, let's just use the most boilerplate BS politician phrases, and let's pretend like this didn't all happen because de Blasio's a moron who has turned his back on the NYPD. New York is in bad shape. Chicago is in bad shape. Seattle, Portland, Atlanta. How many cities have to effectively lose control, or we lose control of them? Law enforcement, the state no longer really able to protect people and defend them. Remember, for every shooting that happens, for every store that's burned down, every burglary that happens, the neighborhood, the people around that feel less safe. That's an intrusion on the public psyche, right? When these bad things happen, when there's a surge in them, it affects everybody who lives in that area. Now they all have to be worried. I have to walk female relatives at night across Midtown Manhattan for safety reasons. That I haven't had to do that in a very long, and it's completely understandable. It's completely legitimate that would be a move that I would make, right? That's now an expectation that I have. You know, I will not allow females that I'm related to, will not allow my girlfriend, I will not allow them to go through certain areas at night by themselves because, you might say, well, are they really, is something really horrible going to happen? They're going to be harassed. They're going to have vagrants on the street come up to them, say disgusting things to them, demand money from them, threaten to grab them. That happens all the time here now. So it's top to bottom, folks. We read about the murders. We hear about the destabilization from with the worst crimes. But it filters through all of society. This is their opening. Here's what you have to remember. They were promising for years to their base. The Democrat promise, the central thesis in the Trump era was that Donald Trump was a moron who would crash the economy and lead us into war, and we would all be miserable from that, right? And it would be so clear it was ridiculous that he had won this election against Clinton. Ridiculous, right? That was the central thesis. Well, they were wrong. The economy was booming. He did not lead us into wars. He actually had a very effective foreign policy. He was right on China. Didn't build the wall, which I'm pretty annoyed about, folks, but we'll talk about that another day. Don't tell me, he's building it, Buck. Not enough. Not enough wall. Well, we're just, I live in reality, folks. Not enough wall. And I'm on the president's team. Not enough wall. And way too much criminal justice reform. But other than that, there's a lot of good things. But he was so much more successful in those first 3 years than they anticipated. And it just was no longer tenable. Even the lunatic libs who were trying to remember, say it was the Obama economy. That was the whole story. It was the Obama economy. They were just desperate for something because the results were so positive. And you and I, people that supported Trump, were in a position where we were saying, look at the results, look at the scoreboard. And then we turn around and say, Trump got it done. And so what do? They make us all miserable. That's their plan. You know what we really need right now? We need the legal wisdom and political insight of Whoopi Goldberg. Yeah, let's get some of that during this crisis. Play 13.
We've sort of felt it a little bit when we've seen other sort of riots break out and we've seen them bust out troops. But this is different. This feels different. This feels like a planned attack against the American people. And it's very specific and it's very targeted.
The planned attack, I want to be very clear. The planned attack, and one of my favorite things, and Tucker, I don't want to be like doing too much, oh, Tucker's been amazing on his show lately because, but he has, his last 90 days or so has just been en fuego. But one of my favorite things he said is that Whoopi Goldberg, not funny. I don't know why I've never heard her say anything funny in my life, but we're all told, she's so funny. Now she's supposed to be insightful, but the attack that she's talking about is federal law enforcement enforcing the law. That's not the mobs of lunatics burning things down, attacking strangers, attacking businesses and police, looting Starbucks, setting fire to buildings, breaking into drugstores. That's not the attack. The attack are the law enforcement officers saying, hey, stop doing that illegal thing. These people are nuts. They're absolutely nuts. And I just want to notice that they're talking now about fascism and the Stasi that Trump is deploying. And you had that member of Congress, I think it was Congresswoman Wilson, saying that maybe these federal agents are the ones that are going to help Trump stay even if he loses. They're saying all this crazy stuff. Meanwhile, Democrat governors and mayors are like, stay home, shut down your business, can't see your friends, can't see your family until we say so. And they don't talk about tyranny there with the whole COVID nonsense that they're pulling right now. Oh, we're going to move all the metrics. We're going to move all the numbers so that it's actually just their say-so when we get our lives back. It's not based on anything else. That's what Democrats are doing. No tyranny there.